A billionaire walks onto his factory floor and locks eyes with a black woman in a wheelchair, assembling precision steel with flawless hands. When she turns her head, something inside him shatters. She has the exact birthmark his daughter had, the daughter he buried 25 years ago. The machinery roars. His breath stops. One question tears through him. How is she alive? If you're enjoying this, Saturn, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's continue. The 4:30 a.m. alarm tore through the silence of Ciara Drew's cramped East Detroit apartment. She transferred from bed to wheelchair, her joints protesting the movement. 28 years old and her body already carried the weight of a decade in heavy industry. The mirror reflected sharp brown eyes beneath thick natural curls she kept wrapped tight with a green headband, the only splash of color she allowed herself for the factory floor. "Morning, Aunt Marla," she whispered, glancing toward the adjacent room where her 62-year-old adoptive aunt breathed slowly beneath a faded quilt. Pill bottles lined the nightstand like tiny soldiers: diabetes, hypertension, arthritis. Each bottle represented another reason Ciara couldn't quit the job that slowly ground her down. The Detroit steel assembly plant squatted on the industrial riverfront like a fortress of noise and heat, exhaust towers belching white steam into the gray November morning. Ciara pulled on her blue coveralls and high-vis vest, the yellow fabric bright against her dark skin. She'd earned her precision assembly certification through night courses, but the bitter shift supervisor still treated her like she'd wandered in off the street. Across town, Simpson Jones stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Bloomfield Hills estate, sipping espresso from bone china. The sunrise painted the skyline in copper and steel, but he saw only numbers. The quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk showed profits up 31%. His industrial empire now spanned 7 states. At 63, his silver hair stayed slicked back perfectly, his burgundy suit pressed to a razor-edge precision. But the mansion echoed with ghosts. 25 years since the fire, 25 years since the tiny coffin, 25 years of private investigators, false leads, and sleepless nights wondering if his daughter Lillian was truly gone, or if he'd failed to look hard enough. Simpson's phone buzzed. "Boss, the Detroit plant inspection is confirmed for 8 o'clock a.m., his assistant's voice announced crisply. The union rep wants to discuss updated accessibility protocols. "Cancel the union meeting," Simpson replied, straightening his burgundy tie. "I want to see the floor myself. No advance notice." The Castellano-Jones Industrial Works employed 1,240 people across 3 shifts in 5 buildings. Simpson had acquired the struggling facility 4 years ago, transforming it into the most efficient steel assembly operation in the Midwest. He knew every metric by heart: tonnage processed, profit margins per unit, worker productivity curves. What he didn't know was that employee number 00847 was about to detonate his entire world. Ciara clocked in at 7:42 a.m., pulling her work gloves from the locker. The factory floor hummed with industrial violence, conveyor belts grinding, sparks flying from cutting stations, the rhythmic slam of hydraulic presses. She wheeled with practiced efficiency toward her precision assembly station, hands already reaching for her tools. But the shift supervisor's voice stopped her cold. "Drew, where do you think you're rolling?" Supervisor Harris stood 6'1", his gut straining against a stained company polo, 51 years old with thinning hair and the perpetual sneer of a man who believed the world owed him more. He'd made Ciara's life hell since her first week. Subtle sabotage, deliberate assignment changes, public ridicule disguised as feedback. "My station, Mr. Harris," Ciara replied evenly, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her chest. "The Henderson Aerospace contract components need final inspection. I'm scheduled for quality control." "Not today, college girl," Harris spat, his voice carrying across the factory floor. Other workers slowed their tasks, sensing blood in the water. "Real workers handle the precision contracts. You're on parts sorting. 3rd bay." Ciara's jaw tightened. "Mr. Harris, I have the highest quality ratings in the department for 6 consecutive months. The Henderson specs specifically request my sign-off." "Listen here, charity case." Harris stepped closer, looming over her wheelchair. I don't care what diversity quota got you hired. This is my floor, and I say what gets done. Now move that chair before I write you up for insubordination. Ciara reached up to adjust her headband, frustration burning hot behind her eyes, and the motion pulled her high-vis vest tight across her shoulders, exposing the small, star-shaped birthmark behind her left ear, perfectly visible through the mesh panel backing. Simpson Jones chose that exact moment to enter through the main floor access door, Italian leather shoes clicking against oil-stained concrete. He'd planned to observe quietly from the mezzanine walkway, take notes, speak with the floor management. But Harris's voice, sharp, cruel, carrying, drew his attention to the confrontation unfolding 30 yards away. His eyes found the young woman in the wheelchair, noting her straight posture, the way she refused to shrink despite the intimidation. Professional, composed, defiant. Then she tilted her head, adjusting that green headband with calloused fingers, and Simpson's world stopped. The birthmark, star-shaped, roughly the size of a dime, positioned exactly behind her left ear. The same mark he used to trace with his finger during bedtime stories, telling 3-year-old Lillian that the stars had kissed her there, marked her as special, chosen for extraordinary things. Simpson's leather portfolio slipped from nerveless fingers, hitting the concrete with a sharp crack that echoed across the factory floor. The crash caused heads to turn, conversations to pause. But Simpson couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process anything except that impossible mark on a stranger's skin. Harris noticed the owner's arrival and puffed up, voice rising to perform. See, Mr. Jones, even you agree this one doesn't belong on Skilled. But Ciara had already spun her wheelchair around at the word Jones, and Simpson found himself staring into his own eyes. Not similar, identical. The same deep brown with golden undertones, the same slight upturn at the outer corners, the same intelligent fire that his wife Rachel used to tease him about, calling them storm eyes, beautiful and dangerous. Simpson saw the determined set of her jaw, Lillian's stubborn chin when she refused to go to bed. He saw the way her left eyebrow arched slightly higher when challenged, exactly like his daughter used to do when questioned. He saw the way she held her shoulders, proud and unbending, even seated, and then their eyes locked, and recognition hit like a freight train with no brakes. Coffee cup, birthmark, eyes. The small scar near her hairline from the swing set accident when Lillian was 2. Simpson's vision tunneled, his knees buckled. The factory noise faded to white static. His voice came out strangled, barely audible over the machinery. This cannot be. Simpson masked his shock behind years of boardroom discipline, forcing his face into neutral lines even as his pulse hammered against his ribs. The factory managers hovered nearby, oblivious, discussing production quotas and safety metrics, words that dissolved into meaningless noise. Mr. Harris, Simpson's voice cut through the factory din, glacial and precise. My office, now. The supervisor's smug expression faltered. Simpson gestured toward the mezzanine administration suite, already moving, his Italian shoes clicking against the metal stairs with mechanical rhythm. Behind him, Harris scrambled to follow, smoothing his stained polo, suddenly nervous. Inside the glass-walled office, Simpson closed the door, shutting out the factory roar. He didn't sit, didn't invite Harris to sit, just stood with his back to the window, arms crossed, studying the man who'd called his possible daughter Charity. The worker you were reprimanding, Simpson began, voice dangerously calm. How long has she been employed here? Harris blinked, confused by the question. Who, the wheelchair girl? Maybe 18 months? 2 years? Her name? Drew, Ciara Drew. Harris shifted his weight. Look, Mr. Jones, if this is about workplace accommodations, HR signed off on. Family? Simpson interrupted. Does she have family listed in her emergency contacts? I think some aunt. I don't really, medical history on file? Harris's confusion deepened into suspicion. Sir, I don't have access to medical files. That's HR and legal. Is there a problem with her disability compliance or... You called her a charity hire, Simpson said softly, each word edged with ice. in front of the entire floor. Harris's face reddened. Look, she's got an attitude problem, and the other workers complain that she gets special treatment because of the chair. Show me her quality metrics. Sir, her precision ratings, error rates, output consistency. Simpson leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You said she doesn't belong on skilled contracts. Show me the data that supports that assessment. Silence. Harris fumbled for words that wouldn't come. That's what I thought, Simpson said quietly. You're suspended pending investigation into workplace harassment. Clear your locker. HR will contact you tomorrow. Harris's jaw dropped. You can't. Over her? Sir, I've been here 12 years. And in 12 years, you've learned nothing about respect. Simpson turned his back, dismissing him. Get out. The moment Harity left, Simpson picked up the desk phone. This is Jones. I need the complete personnel file for Ciara Drew, employee number 00847, brought to the executive suite immediately, and pull all surveillance footage from her workstation for the past 6 months. 20 minutes later, Simpson sat alone in the dimly lit surveillance room. Ciara's file spread before him like evidence at a crime scene. He memorized every detail. Full name, Ciara Lillian Drew. Lillian. The middle name hit him like a fist to the chest. Hire date, March 14, 2023. Previous address, 2847 Hastings Street, East Detroit. Emergency contact, Marla Drew, aunt, same address. But before age 4, nothing. No birth certificate on file, just a state-issued ID and a vague adoption record notation from a private agency that no longer existed. Simpson's hands trembled as he cued the security footage. The monitor flickered to life, showing Ciara at her workstation 3 days ago. He zoomed in on her face, watched her concentrate, eyebrows furrowing, left brow arching higher than the right. He paused the frame, enhanced the image. The star-shaped birthmark behind her ear buckram filled the screen. He replayed the footage, again and again, watching her hands move with surgical precision, assembling components that required micron-level accuracy. Watching her smile briefly at a coworker, a flash of warmth that reminded him of summer mornings in the garden. The garden. The memory slammed into him unbidden. 3-year-old Lillian laughing in the estate garden, dirt on her yellow sundress, clutching a fistful of dandelions. Simpson kneeling beside her, tracing the star-shaped mark behind her ear. You're marked by the stars, sweetheart. That means you're destined for something extraordinary. Then fire, screaming. The small white coffin lowered into the ground while his wife Rachel collapsed, screaming that it was his fault, that his enemies had done this, that he should have protected them. Simpson's vision blurred. He wiped his eyes roughly and stood, gathering Ciara's file. In the back of his town car, heading toward the city, Simpson dialed a number he hadn't used in 7 years. Marcus, it's Simpson Jones. I need you to run a background check. Quiet, thorough, no records filed with the company. Mr. Jones, the private investigator's voice crackled through the speaker. I thought you'd given up. Ciara Drew, DRE, age 28, Detroit. I need everything. Birth records, adoption files, medical history, school transcripts, anything before age 4, anything hidden. Understood. Timeline? Yesterday. Alone in his penthouse that night, Simpson sat at his mahogany desk, old photo albums spread before him like relics from another life. Beside them, his laptop displayed frozen surveillance stills of Ciara's face. Zoomed and enhanced, he opened an album to a photograph of Lillian at age 3, sitting in a red wagon, grinning at the camera. He placed a printed still of Ciara beside it. The eyes, identical deep brown with gold flecks, the same almond shape, same slight upturn at the corners. The left eyebrow, higher arch when concentrating. Both photos showed it. The curve of the chewing, the set of the mouth when determined, and the birthmark. Star-shaped, same size, same location, exactly the same. Simpson stood slowly, walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Detroit skyline. The city stretched below him. Millions of lights, millions of livies, millions of secrets buried in the dark. His reflection stared back at him, Older, harder, haunted. If she's Lillian, he whispered to the glass, his breath fogging the surface. Then everything I've believed for 25 years is a lie. The city offered no answers, only silence, and questions that wouldn't let go. Ciara clocked in the next morning to a factory floor thick with whispers. She felt them before she heard them, eyes tracking her wheelchair as she rolled toward her station, conversations pausing mid-sentence, then resuming in hushed tones the moment she passed. The rumor mill had been grinding all night. Heard the owner himself came down yesterday. Suspended Harris on the spot. Something about her. Ciara kept her eyes forward, hands steady on her wheels, but her pulse hammered beneath her high-vis vest. She reached her workstation and began the morning routine. Safety check, tool inventory, quality log review, movements mechanical, mind racing. Why had Simpson Jones stared at her like that? Like he'd seen a ghost? Drew, a sharp voice cut through her thoughts. The interim supervisor, a wiry man named Kelvin, who'd stepped in after Harris's suspension, stood beside her station, arms crossed. Upper management wants me to remind you that any complaints go through proper channels. Don't get comfortable thinking you can run to the boss every time someone hurts your feelings. Ciara's jaw tightened. I didn't file any complaints, Mr. Kelvin. Yeah, well, keep it that way. He walked off, leaving the warning hanging in the air like exhaust fumes. At lunch, Ciara wheeled into the break room, unwrapping the sandwich she'd packed that morning. Her coworker, Shanice, a middle-aged black woman with box braids and a sharp sense of humor, slid into the seat across from her, grinning. Girl, you are famous around here, Shanice teased, popping open her Tupperware. The billionaire couldn't take his eyes off you. Word is he stood there for a full minute just staring. You sure you don't know him? Ciara forced a laugh, tearing her sandwich in half. Trust me, I've never met a billionaire in my life. Maybe he's looking for a wife, one of those weird rich man falls for regular girls stories. Or maybe he's planning layoffs and I'm first on the list. Ciara's voice came out sharper than she intended. Shanice's smile faded. Hey, you okay? Ciara stared at her sandwich, appetite gone. Yeah, it was weird, the way he looked at me, like he knew me. The rest of the shift dragged. Ciara's hands moved through the motions, assembling, inspecting, logging, but her mind kept circling back to that moment on the factory floor. And then, without warning, the other memory surfaced. Fire, metal, sirens, fragments, not a full picture. The smell of smoke and rubber burning. The sound of glass shattering. Pain, sharp, hot, crawling up her spine like electricity. Then white hospital lights, voices she didn't recognize, and waking up in a bed unable to feel her legs. She'd been 3 years old, maybe younger. The doctors said trauma had erased most of her early memories. A mercy, Aunt Marla always insisted. But now, for the first time in years, Ciara wondered, what if it wasn't a mercy? What if it was a lie? The bus ride home felt longer than usual. Ciara stared out the smudged window as the city blurred past, boarded-up storefronts, graffiti-tagged walls. People hunched against the November cold. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Why would a billionaire look at a line worker like that? What if he's investigating me for something? What if he knows something I don't? By the time she reached the apartment, her hands were shaking. Inside, the familiar smell of fried chicken and collard greens wrapped around her like a blanket. Aunt Marla stood at the stove, humming softly, gray curls pinned back with bobby pins. She turned when Ciara wheeled in, her weathered face breaking into a smile. There's my girl. Long day? You could say that. Ciara transferred to the worn armchair by the window, exhaustion settling into her bones. Marla brought over 2 plates, settling onto the couch with a grunt. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of shared struggle and quiet love. So, Ciara finally said, keeping her tone light, the owner came to the plant yesterday, Simpson Jones. Ever heard of him? Aunt Marla's fork paused midair, just for a second. A flicker of something, fear, recognition, crossed her face before she smoothed it away. Can't say I have, Marla replied, chewing slowly. Rich people all look the same to me. He looked at me, weird, like he thought he knew me. Marla waved a hand dismissively. Rich people always look at us like that, baby. Like we're problems that need solving. Don't pay it no mind. But Ciara wasn't satisfied. Auntie, I've been thinking about the accident when I was little. Marla's jaw tightened. Ciara, you said my mother died in a car crash, that the state put me in the system for a while before you took me in. That's right. Then why are there no pictures of me before age 4? No birth certificate in the house? No baby photos? Marla set her plate down, her voice hardening. Because everything burned in a fire at my old apartment. You know this. I've told you 100 times. But the dates don't match, Auntie. Ciara leaned forward, her voice urgent. You said the fire was in 2001, but my adoption paperwork says 2000, and it's from some clinic I can't even find online. Ciara, Marla's voice turned sharp. You had a traumatic childhood. The state lost half your records because they don't care about black babies in the system. That's the truth. Now drop it. They stared at each other, Ciara searching, Marla guarded, until Marla stood abruptly, gathering the plates. I'm tired, baby. Let's not do this tonight. Auntie, I said drop it, Ciara. Later that night, Ciara lay in bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, streetlight shadows dancing across the walls. The apartment was silent except for Aunt Marla's soft snoring in the next room. Ciara's mind replayed the conversation. The flinch when she'd mentioned Simpson Jones's name. The hardness in Marla's voice when pressed about the past. And underneath it all, a question she'd never dared ask herself. Who was I? Before the crash. The answer felt close now. Dangerously close. Like a door she'd been told never to open. Cracked just enough to let the light, in the darkness, spill through. The manila envelope landed on Simpson's desk at 6:47 a.m. Delivered by courier with Marcus's handwriting scrawled across the seal. Urgent, eyes only. Simpson tore it open, hands trembling, spreading the contents across the polished mahogany surface like a surgeon preparing for an autopsy. Ciara Lillian Drew. Date of birth, unknown. Estimated 1997-1998. First official record. Michigan State ID. Issued April 2000. Age listed as approximately 3 years. Adoption process through Lakeview Children's Medical Clinic, Detroit. Facility closed 2003. Adoptive guardian, Marla Drew. Aunt maternal side, no biological verification on file. Birth certificate, none found. Court-issued substitute documentation only. Simpson's blood turned to ice water as he read the final line. Lakeview Children's Medical Clinic. Registered as a subsidiary under Castellano Jones Logistics Division. Discretionary Budget Authorization 1998-2003. Funding overseen by COO Richard Horn. The room tilted. Simpson gripped the edge of his desk, forcing air into his lungs. His own company, his own money, his own signature on the quarterly approvals. 15 minutes later, Simpson stood in the climate-controlled records archive 3 floors below his corporate headquarters, surrounded by banker's boxes stacked floor to ceiling. His assistant had pulled every file related to the logistics division from 1997 to 2005. Simpson rifled through ledgers, his perfectly manicured hands leaving smudges on decade-old paper. And there it was, buried in a 2000 quarterly budget report. Lakeview Children's Medical Clinic. Discretionary fund allocation, $847,000. Notation, pediatric developmental research. Authorization, R. Horn. Simpson's mind spun backward, grasping for memories. Boardroom meetings, Richard's smooth voice presenting cost-benefit analyses. Promising pediatric trials, Simpson. Low risk, high reward. Just sign here. How many times had he signed without reading? How many times had he trusted Richard to handle the details while he focused on expansion, acquisitions, profit margins? The realization hit like a sledgehammer. I built the cage that held my daughter. 20 minutes later, Simpson's Mercedes glided through Detroit's east side, the neighborhood growing more neglected with each passing block. Boarded windows, graffiti-tagged walls, The skeleton of the old Lakeview Children's Medical Clinic rose from a weed-choked lot like a tombstone. Simpson parked, stepping out into the cold November wind. The building's faded sign still clung to the brick facade, pastel letters that once promised care and hope, now peeling and ghost pale. He approached the chain-link fence surrounding the property. A rusted padlock hung loose. Simpson pushed through. The front door had been forced open years ago by squatters or scavengers. Simpson stepped inside, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass and debris. Dust motes swirled in shafts of gray light filtering through shattered windows. The reception area was gutted, furniture long gone, walls stripped of fixtures. But as Simpson moved deeper into the building, he found an office that had been overlooked. Metal filing cabinets, doors hanging open, most files removed or destroyed. He knelt, pulling open the bottom drawer. A single folder remained, water-stained and brittle. Simpson lifted it carefully. The logo on the cover made his breath catch. A stylized helix wrapped around the child's silhouette, and beneath it, GeneSys Pediatric Development Division. GeneSys, a biotech subsidiary he'd authorized in 1999. Richard had pitched it as cutting-edge genetic research with humanitarian applications. Simpson had signed the incorporation papers without a second thought. Inside the folder, fragmented intake forms, redacted patient names, clinical trial protocols for traumatic injury recovery in pediatric subjects, consent forms signed by state guardians. Simpson's stomach turned. These weren't medical trials. They were experiments. And somewhere in this web of lies and buried paperwork, his daughter had disappeared. Simpson sat in his car across the street from 2847 Hastings Street for nearly an hour, engine idling, heat blasting against the November chill. The apartment building was a sagging two-story brick structure, paint peeling, steps cracked. Laundry hung from a second-floor balcony. A rusted van sat on cinder blocks in the driveway. At 5:47 p.m., a bus wheezed to a stop at the corner. Ciara emerged, wheeling down the ramp with practiced efficiency, her green headband visible even in the fading light. Simpson's chest tightened as he watched her navigate the broken sidewalk, wheels catching on uneven concrete. She reached the building's entrance, and a moment later, an older black woman, Aunt Marla he presumed, opened the door, her face breaking into a warm smile. They embraced. Marla held Ciara's face in her hands, saying something that made Ciara laugh. Then they disappeared inside together. Simpson's vision blurred. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. That should have been me. Every day, for 25 years, that should have been me. But he couldn't just knock on the door. Not yet. Not until he had proof. Not until he understood the full scope of what Richard had done. And what role, however unwitting, Simpson himself had played. Back in his penthouse that night, Simpson paced before the floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights blurring below him. His phone sat on the desk, screen glowing with the HR contact pulled up. He'd rehearsed the words a dozen times, now he just had to say them. Simpson picked up the phone, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He pressed dial. "This is Simpson Jones. I need you to schedule a confidential performance review, all for employee 00847, Ciara Drew, tomorrow, 2 o'clock p.m. My private office at the Detroit plant." A pause on the other end. "Sir, is there a specific reason for just schedule it?" His voice came out harsher than intended. He softened slightly. "Tell her it's routine, executive-level quality recognition. Nothing disciplinary." "Understood, Mr. Jones." Simpson ended the call and set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter. Tomorrow. Tomorrow he would sit across from the young woman who might be his daughter and ask the questions that could destroy them both, or save us. Simpson stared at his reflection in the darkened window. A ghost of a man haunted by choices he'd made in boardrooms, signatures scrawled without thought, trust given to the wrong person at the worst possible time. "Forgive me, Lillian," he whispered to the glass. "Forgive me for not finding you sooner." The city offered no absolution, only the relentless march toward a truth he wasn't sure either of them could survive. The email arrived at 10:47 a.m., marked confidential. "Ms. Drew, you are requested to attend a private performance review with Mr. Simpson Jones at 2 o'clock p.m. today in the executive office, Building A, third floor. This is routine executive level recognition. Please arrive promptly. Ciara stared at the screen, her pulse hammering in her ears. Girl, what did you do? Shanice leaned over her shoulder, eyes wide. Nobody gets called to the owner's office for a routine review. I didn't do anything, Ciara whispered, but her hands trembled on her wheelchair's armrests. By noon, the entire factory floor was buzzing. Co-workers whispered theories. She was being promoted, fired, investigated, sued. One welder joked she must be Simpson's secret child. The others laughed. Ciara didn't. At 1:55 p.m., Ciara wheeled into the gleaming third-floor executive suite, her coveralls feeling suddenly shabby against the polished marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. The assistant, a crisp woman in a tailored suit, gestured toward a set of wooden double doors. Mr. Jones is expecting you. Ciara's stomach twisted as the doors opened. The office was massive, wood-paneled walls, a U-shaped mahogany desk dominating the space, leather seating arranged near a wall of windows overlooking the Detroit skyline. Simpson stood by those windows, hands clasped behind his back, his burgundy suit perfectly pressed. He turned when she entered. For a moment, neither spoke. Ms. Drew, Simpson finally said, his voice strained. Please come in and close the door. Ciara wheeled forward slowly, hyper-aware of every sound, the hum of the air conditioning, the distant factory noise, her own shallow breathing. Simpson gestured toward the managers and assistant hovering near the door. Everyone out, now. They filed out quickly, the door clicking shut with a finality that made Ciara's skin prickle. Simpson moved to his desk but didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against it, studying her with an intensity that made her want to flee. You're not being fired, he said abruptly, or disciplined. I need you to know that first. Then, why am I here? Ciara's voice came out smaller than she intended. Your work is exceptional. Your precision ratings are the highest in the plant. Simpson's words sounded rehearsed, mechanical. I wanted to commend you personally. Ciara's eyes narrowed. Sir, with respect, you don't call line workers to your office for compliments. A ghost of a smile crossed Simpson's face. No, I don't. He paused, then plunged ahead. I need to ask you some personal questions. They're going to sound strange, invasive, but I'm asking you to trust me. Trust you? Ciara's hands tightened on her wheels. I don't even know you. I know. Simpson's voice cracked slightly, but I need to ask anyway. Your childhood, do you remember it? Before age 3? Ciara froze. What? Scars, medical history, the accident that... He gestured toward her wheelchair, then stopped, realizing how invasive it sounded. Anything you remember. Anything at all. This is insane, Ciara said, her voice rising. Are you investigating me? Is this about disability discrimination? Because if... The birthmark behind your ear, Simpson interrupted, his voice urgent. Star-shaped, about the size of a dime. Has anyone ever commented on it? When you were little? Ciara's blood turned cold. Her hand instinctively moved to touch the spot behind her left ear. How do you know about that? Simpson's composure shattered. He turned away, gripping the edge of his desk, shoulders shaking. Because my daughter had the exact same mark in the exact same place. Silence stretched between them like a chasm. Your daughter? Ciara's voice was barely a whisper. Simpson turned back, and Ciara saw tears streaming down his face. This powerful, untouchable billionaire, weeping openly. Her name was Lillian. She disappeared 25 years ago in a fire. She was 3 years old. They told me she died. I'm not... Ciara started, but the words died in her throat. You have her eyes, her birthmark, her expressions. Simpson stepped closer, desperation bleeding through every word. And your middle name is Lillian. You appeared in official records at age 3 with no birth certificate, adopted through a clinic my company funded. Ciara's world tilted. That's impossible. I'm Ciara Drew. My mother died in a car accident. Aunt Marla took me in. Do you remember your mother? Simpson asked gently. Ciara opened her mouth, closed it. No, just fragments. Fire, metal, pain. Not a car accident. Fire. The room felt suddenly airless. Ciara's hands trembled on her wheels. This is crazy. You're saying I'm... What? Your dead daughter? That's insane. I know how it sounds. Simpson's voice steadied, slipping into the calm authority of a businessman making a pitch. Which is why I'm proposing something concrete. A DNA test. Confidential. I'll pay for everything. If the results prove I'm wrong, I will never contact you again, and I will personally ensure a formal apology and compensation for the distress I've caused. And if you're right, Ciara's voice broke on the last word. Simpson's composure crumbled again. Then everything I've believed for 25 years is a lie, and everything you've believed about yourself is a lie, and we'll have to figure out how to live with that. Ciara stared at him, this stranger who looked at her like she was the answer to a prayer he'd stopped saying. Her mind raced through the gaps in her history, the missing baby pictures, Aunt Marla's flinch at his name, the inconsistent paperwork. And if I'm not her, Ciara asked quietly. Simpson met her eyes, his voice steady despite the tears. Then I will still owe you an apology for every second of distress I've caused, and I'll make sure your life is better for having endured this nightmare. 3 hours later, Ciara sat in a private medical lab on the outskirts of Detroit, a nurse tying a tourniquet around her arm. Across the sterile room, Simpson sat rigid in his chair, watching the needle pierce his vein with the same distant expression. Results in 48 to 72 hours, the lab technician said, labeling the vials with clinical efficiency. Simpson and Ciara left separately, him through the front entrance, her through the accessibility ramp on the side. Outside, the November twilight had turned the city into a watercolor of grays and golds. Streetlights flickered on, reflecting off the lab's glass doors. Ciara paused at the bottom of the ramp, her wheelchair motionless, staring at her reflection in the darkened glass. The woman staring back looked the same. Green headband, tired eyes, calloused hands. But Ciara didn't recognize her anymore. Who am I, she thought, the question echoing in the hollow space where certainty used to live. Ciara Drew? Lillian Jones? Someone else entirely. The city lights blurred as tears filled her eyes. In 48 hours, she would have an answer, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to know. The call came on a gray Thursday morning, 72 hours after the blood draw. Simpson sat alone in the same sterile conference room at the private lab, hands folded on the table, back rigid, eyes fixed on the door. Across the room, Ciara waited in her wheelchair, fingers gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Neither had spoken since arriving. The door opened. Dr. Helena Fisher, the lead geneticist, entered carrying a manila folder, her face carefully neutral. But Simpson saw the tremor in her hands as she set the folder on the table. Mr. Jones, Miss Drew? Her voice was steady, professional, but her eyes betrayed something deeper. Shock, perhaps, or pity. I have your results. She opened the folder, spreading 2 pages across the table. Simpson's vision tunneled to the numbers at the bottom of the report, bold and unforgiving. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Conclusion. Simpson Jones cannot be excluded as the biological father of Ciara Lillian Drew. Dr. Fisher's voice continued, distant and hollow. We analyzed 23 genetic markers. All 23 match the expected parent-child inheritance pattern. This level of certainty means Mr. Jones is 99.9% more likely to be the biological father than any random individual from the same ethnic population. The room tilted. Simpson's knees buckled. He gripped the edge of the table, the wood grain blurring as 25 years of grief, guilt, and unspoken prayers crashed over him like a tidal wave. A sound tore from his throat, half sob, half scream, raw and broken. She's alive. My baby is alive. His body folded forward, forehead pressed against the cold table, shoulders shaking violently as decades of anguish poured out in gasping, heaving sobs. Across the room, Ciara sat frozen, the world roaring in her ears like static. The numbers on the page swam before her eyes. 99.99%. Not a mistake, not a coincidence. Truth, she was Ciara Drew, 28 years of memories, struggles, identity. She was also Lillian Jones, 3 years of stolen life, Erased history, buried truth. Both, neither. Someone she didn't recognize anymore. Her hands trembled. Her breath came in shallow gasps. The walls closed in. Dr. Fisher quietly left the room, giving them space for the devastation. 25 years ago, Simpson stood in the ruins of his estate's east wing, ash and smoke still hanging in the November air. Firefighters moved through the wreckage, their faces grim. The fire chief approached, soot-stained and exhausted. "Mr. Jones, I'm so sorry. The body we recovered from the nursery, it's a child, female, approximately 3 years old." Simpson's world shattered. His COO, Richard Horn, appeared at his elbow, calm, efficient, already handling logistics. "Simpson, the coroner's office is overwhelmed. The body it's too badly burned for viewing. I've arranged for a private service. We'll handle the arrangements quietly, for Rachel's sake." Simpson, numb and broken, simply nodded. Days later, Richard presented insurance forms, clinical recommendations, experimental treatment proposals for Rachel's breakdown. These pediatric trauma trials could have saved her, Simpson, but they were too risky. The ethics board wouldn't approve them in time. Simpson signed everything Richard put in front of him. Grief made him careless. Trust made him blind. He signed away oversight to Richard the exact week his daughter disappeared. Simpson lifted his head from the table, tears streaming down his face, eyes red and hollow. He looked at Ciara, Lillian, and saw 25 years of stolen birthdays, missed milestones, a childhood he would never get back. "I failed you," he whispered, voice cracking. "Every day for 25 years, I failed you." Ciara couldn't speak, could barely breathe. An hour later, Simpson's Mercedes pulled up outside 2847 Hastings Street. This time, he didn't sit in the car watching. This time, he climbed the cracked concrete steps and knocked. Aunt Marla opened the door, her face going pale when she saw him. Behind him, Ciara sat in her wheelchair, eyes red, expression unreadable. "Ms. Drew," Simpson said quietly, holding up the DNA report, "we need to talk." Marla's hands flew to her mouth. She stumbled backward, tears already streaming down her weathered face. Oh, God, no." "Inside," Simpson said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. They moved into the cramped living room, Simpson standing stiffly, Ciara by the window, Marla collapsing onto the couch, her body racked with sobs. "I didn't know," Marla choked out, hands shaking. "I swear to God, I didn't know she was yours." Simpson handed her the report. She stared at it, tears falling onto the paper. "Tell me," Simpson said quietly. "Tell me everything." Marla's voice came out broken, fragmented, like confession and prayer intertwined. "I was a nurse at Lakeview Children's Medical Clinic. Your company funded it. October 2000, middle of the night. They brought in a little girl, maybe 3 years old, gravely injured. Van crashed, they said. She had a head injury, spinal trauma, burns on her arms." Simpson's fists clenched. "She was labeled unidentified. No family listed. No name." Marla wiped her eyes roughly. 2 men in suits came the next morning. Security, corporate types. "They told me and the attending physician to declare her dead. Sign the death certificate. Transfer the body to a research facility for disposal." Ciara's breath hitched. Simpson's face drained of color. "The doctor, he refused at first. Then they showed him documents. Legal immunity, liability waivers. He caved." Marla's voice turned bitter. "But I couldn't. I looked at that little girl, breathing, Aliba, fighting, and I couldn't let them take her." "So you—" Simpson's voice was barely audible. "I falsified part of the paperwork, declared her expired on the internal transfer form, but kept her on life support in a back room for 3 days. Then I smuggled her out during a shift change. I told my supervisor she was my sister's child, that my sister died in the crash. I took her home." Marla looked at Ciara, love and guilt warring in her eyes. "I never knew who she was, never knew powerful people were hunting her. I just knew those men wanted her gone. So I hid her, gave her a name, raised her as mine." Silence filled the room, suffocating and vast. Simpson stared at Marla, this woman who had saved his daughter when he couldn't, who had sacrificed everything to protect a child she didn't know. "You saved her," Simpson whispered, his voice breaking. You saved her, and I failed her. Marla shook her head, tears streaming. I didn't save her. I stole her from you. I stole 25 years you should have had. No, Simpson's voice was firm, cutting through the grief. Richard stole her. The men in suits stole her. You gave her a life. Ciara sat frozen between them, staring at the two people who defined her existence. One who raised her, one who made her. Love and betrayal tangled so tightly she couldn't tell them apart. Who am I, she thought, the question no longer rhetorical. Ciara Drew, the woman Marla built? Or Lillian Jones, the girl Simpson lost? The DNA said she was both, but DNA couldn't tell her how to live with that truth. Simpson spent 3 days buried in his corporate archives, emerging only for coffee that went cold on his desk. Spreadsheets, email chains, subsidiary registrations, shell company transactions dating back 27 years. What he found didn't just confirm his suspicions, it shattered the last fragments of his soul. Richard Horn had used Lakeview Children's Medical Clinic and at least 4 other shell entities, GeneSys Pediatric Development, MedTech Logistics Solutions, Horizon Bioresearch, and Clearview Analytics, to run illegal biomedical trials on children. The costs had been buried in logistics budgets, R&D line items, discretionary allocations. Simpson had signed without scrutiny because he trusted Richard to handle operational details, while Simpson focused on expansion and profit margins. 1998-2003, $4.7 million funneled through shell companies labeled as Pediatric Developmental Research. Subject count: estimated 30-50 children, identities erased, labeled unidentified or state custody, authorization signatures. Simpson Jones, CEO. Every single one. Simpson stared at his own signature on a 2000 funding approval, dated 3 weeks after Lillian's disappearance, and felt bile rise in his throat. I signed away my daughter's life while grieving her death. His obsession with building an empire had given Richard the perfect cover. Simpson had been so focused on quarterly earnings, acquisitions, and shareholder value that he never questioned why a logistics company needed biomedical research subsidiaries. He'd been complicit through negligence, and that truth broke him more completely than Richard's betrayal ever could. Simpson scheduled the meeting for 4:00 p.m. on a Friday in the glass-walled boardroom on the 47th floor of Castellano Jones headquarters. Richard arrived in his usual tailored suit, gray hair perfectly styled, carrying a leather portfolio, and the easy confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. Simpson, Richard greeted warmly, settling into the chair across the table. Patricia said you wanted to discuss the Dubai expansion. I've prepared some projections. Tell me about Lakeview Children's Medical Clinic. Simpson interrupted, his voice flat. Richard's smile froze, just for a second, then smoothed back into place. I'm sorry? Lakeview, GeneSys, the pediatric trials you ran through my logistics budgets from 1998 to 2003. Simpson, I have no idea what you're talking about. Richard's tone shifted, condescending, paternal. You've been under tremendous stress. Perhaps you should... Simpson slid a folder across the table. Richard opened it slowly, his face drained of color as he scanned the financial records, email printouts, shell company registrations. Where did you get these? Richard's voice turned sharp, dangerous. My archives, my money, my signatures. Simpson leaned forward, eyes burning. You used my company to traffic children, to run illegal experiments, to erase identities and bury bodies. Richard closed the folder carefully, his expression shifting from shock to something colder. Calculation. And what exactly do you plan to do with these accusations? I've already contacted federal authorities. Simpson's voice was steady despite the rage trembling through his hands. The FBI, the SEC, they're very interested in corporate fraud, human trafficking, and research misconduct. Richard laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You think they'll believe you? You signed every authorization, Simpson. Your name is on every document. You're as complicit as I am. The difference, Simpson said quietly, is that I was negligent. You were intentional. Richard stood abruptly, buttoning his jacket. You want to know the truth, Simpson? You should feel guilty because you were too busy playing tycoon to notice what was happening under your nose. I ran those trials for years, took in dozens of children, conducted groundbreaking research, and you signed off on every penny without asking a single question. One of those children was my daughter, Simpson said, his voice breaking. Richard's eyes glittered with something cruel. Yes, poor Lillian. Such potential, such unfortunate timing. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. You only see the truth now because it affected you personally. All those other children? You didn't care then, and you wouldn't care now if your precious daughter hadn't been one of them. Simpson's fists clenched, but he forced himself to remain seated. The recording device in his pocket captured every word. Richard straightened, smoothing his tie. Whatever evidence you think you have, Simpson, it implicates you as much as me. I'll destroy you in court, and that girl you found, she's evidence of your own criminal negligence. Good luck explaining that to shareholders. He walked out, leaving Simpson alone in the boardroom, hands shaking with rage and grief. But Richard had made a critical mistake. He'd assumed Simpson cared more about his reputation than justice. He was wrong. At 11:47 p.m., Simpson sat in his darkened penthouse, laptop glowing in front of him. An encrypted email had arrived from an anonymous sender 30 minutes earlier, flagged by his security system as high priority. Subject line, you need to see this. Simpson opened the attachment. A video file, timestamped 3 months ago, began to play. The footage showed a sterile facility, white walls, industrial lighting, rows of beds with children strapped to IV lines. Some appeared sedated. Others stared blankly at nothing. Medical equipment surrounded them, monitors beeping in sterile rhythm. A voice, unmistakably Richard's, spoke off camera. Subject 17, female, age approximately 4, unidentified origin, neurological baseline established. Beginning protocol Delta 7. Remember, these subjects have no legal identities, no families looking for them. They're ghosts. Scientifically, they're invaluable. Legally, they don't exist. The camera panned across more beds, more children, more ghosts. Simpson's stomach turned. He replayed the video 3 times, memorizing every detail. The facility layout, the equipment logos, the timestamp. Then he forwarded it to Special Agent Monica Reyes at the FBI's Detroit field office, the federal contact he'd briefed 2 days earlier. Subject line, proof, location unknown. Voice identification confirmed as Richard Horn, former COO, Castellano Jones Industries. Request immediate coordination. He hit send, then forwarded copies to the SEC and the Department of Health and Human Services. Simpson closed the laptop, exhaustion and nausea warring inside him. Within hours, federal agents would begin coordinated raids on every property linked to Richard's shell companies. But Richard was smart. He'd see it coming. Across town, in a high-rise luxury apartment overlooking the Detroit River, Richard Horn sat at his own laptop, monitoring encrypted communication channels he'd installed years ago as insurance. His screen flashed with intercepted traffic, FBI field office communications, SEC case file updates, Department of Justice coordination memos, all centered on him. Richard's jaw tightened. He picked up his phone and dialed a secured number. Marcus, he said when the line connected, Simpson Jones has become a problem. So has the girl, Ciara Drew, also known as Lillian Jones. They're cooperating with federal authorities. A pause, then, what do you want us to do? Richard stared out at the city lights, his reflection cold and hollow in the glass. Take care of them. Both of them. Tonight. Another pause. You're sure? No loose ends, Richard said quietly. Make it look like an accident, a home invasion. Whatever. Just make sure they can't testify. He ended the call and poured himself a scotch, swirling the amber liquid as he watched the city below. Simpson wanted justice? Fine. But justice required witnesses, and by morning Richard planned to ensure there were none left alive. Simpson's text arrived at 9:47 p.m. We need to talk, face to face. Too dangerous over phone. Private lab parking garage, level B2, 10:30 p.m. Come alone. Ciara stared at the message, her stomach twisting. After 3 days of coordinating with federal authorities, dodging reporters, and living in a safe house, the idea of meeting in an underground garage felt reckless. But Simpson insisted it was the most discreet location. No surveillance cameras from Richard's network, isolated enough for privacy. She texted back, "I'll be there." At 10:28 p.m., Ciara wheeled into the underground parking garage of the private medical facility where they'd done the DNA test. Level B2 was nearly deserted, just a handful of cars scattered across the dimly lit expanse of concrete pillars and painted lines. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows. Something felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. The usual hum of ventilation systems seemed muffled. Ciara's factory-trained instincts, honed from years of navigating industrial spaces, screamed danger. She positioned herself near the elevator, hands tense on her wheels, scanning the garage for exits she'd noticed during their first visit. A service corridor near the northwest corner, emergency stairwell to the east, freight elevator maintenance access. Headlights swept across the concrete as Simpson's black Mercedes descended the ramp, tires echoing in the cavernous space. He pulled into a spot 20 feet from Ciara, engine idling. Then everything erupted. 3 black SUVs roared from the shadows, tires screeching, blocking the exits. Doors flew open. Men in tactical gear emerged, weapons raised. "Get down!" Simpson screamed, throwing his car into reverse. Bullets shattered his rear windshield, safety glass exploding inward. Simpson yanked the wheel, tires smoking as he fishtailed toward Ciara. Ciara's mind went cold and clear, the same clarity she felt when precision assembling aerospace components under pressure. She pivoted her wheelchair, assessing angles, distances, cover points. Simpson's car screeched to a halt beside Ferris. He threw open the passenger door. "Get in!" "No time," Ciara shouted over the gunfire. "Behind the pillar, now!" Simpson grabbed the handles of her wheelchair and shoved it behind a massive concrete support column, just as bullets tore through the space they'd occupied. He threw himself in front of her, shielding her body with his own as chunks of concrete exploded from the pillar surface. "They're boxing us in," Simpson gasped, his expensive suit torn, face pale. Ciara's eyes darted across the garage, mind mapping the space like a factory floor blueprint. "Service corridor, northwest corner, 30 yards. We'll never make it." "Yes, we will." Ciara's voice was steady, authoritative, the tone she used when directing crane operators. "Listen to me. The automatic door cycles every 8 seconds. The echo from their footsteps will mask our movement. We go on my count." Simpson stared at her. This woman in a wheelchair, commanding a battlefield like a general. 3, 2, 1, go! Simpson pushed her wheelchair at full sprint as gunfire erupted behind them, bullets ricocheting off concrete and metal. They reached the service corridor door just as it began its automatic cycle, slipping through the narrowing gap. The corridor beyond was dimly lit, lined with electrical panels and HVAC equipment. Footsteps pounded behind them, their pursuers gaining ground. "Left," Ciara commanded, reading the corridor like she'd designed it herself. "Loading bay access, 50 feet. Simpson's lungs burned. His 63-year-old body wasn't built for this. But Ciara's voice kept him moving, her spatial awareness guiding them through a maze that would have trapped him alone. They burst into a loading bay, forklifts, pallets, freight elevators. Behind them, the gunmen shouted coordinates into radios. Ciara wheeled to the freight elevator control panel, her calloused fingers moving with the same precision she used on factory electrical systems. "Keep them back. I need 30 seconds. Simpson grabbed a metal pipe from a nearby pallet, positioning himself at the corridor entrance, and his hands shook. His heart hammered. Wealth meant nothing here. Power meant nothing. Only survival. Ciara stripped 2 wires from the elevator panel, bypassing the call system, hot-wiring the doors. Sparks flew. The elevator groaned to life. "Done!" She reversed her wheelchair just as the gunmen rounded the corner. Simpson threw the pipe, buying them seconds, then dove into the elevator with Ciara. She slammed the emergency stop button between floors 2 and 3, trapping their pursuers in the loading bay. "They're stuck," Ciara breathed, chest heaving. "For now." Above them, sirens wailed, distant but growing closer. One of the gunmen's voices echoed up the elevator shaft, shouting into a phone, "Boss, we're compromised. The feds traced your video. They're everywhere." Simpson and Ciara locked eyes. Richard's arrogance had exposed his own location. Ciara released the emergency stop. The elevator lurched upward, depositing them on the ground floor service exit. They burst through the doors into the night air just as FBI vehicles flooded the parking garage entrance, red and blue lights strobing across the medical facility. Simpson collapsed against the exterior wall, gasping, his burgundy suit shredded and bloodstained. Ciara's wheelchair stopped beside him, her hands trembling on the wheels for the first time. For a long moment, they just breathed, alive, shaken, bound by survival. Then Simpson reached out, his hand finding Ciara's. She gripped it tightly. "You saved my life," Simpson whispered, voice breaking. "You shielded mine," Ciara replied, tears streaming down her face. Father and daughter, not by memory or history, but by choice, by fire, by the simple, profound act of protecting each other when everything else had been stripped away. Federal agents swarmed past them, securing the garage, shouting orders. But Simpson and Ciara didn't move. They just held on, clutching each other like lifelines in the dark. Two people who'd been strangers a week ago, now bound by DNA, trauma, and the impossible truth that sometimes family isn't something you remember. It's something you survived together. The headlines broke 3 days after the parking garage ambush. FBI raids secret medical facility. Dozens of children rescued from illegal experiments. Castellano Jones empire implicated in 25-year child trafficking conspiracy. Former KOO Richard Horn arrested. Screams she was supposed to die during perp walk. The footage played on every network. Federal agents storming a sterile facility outside Detroit, leading out frightened children wrapped in blankets, seizing boxes of records that documented decades of atrocities. And Richard Horn, silver-haired disheveled, face twisted with rage, screaming at reporters as agents shoved him into a vehicle. Simpson never noticed anything. He signed every authorization. This is his fault. But the most devastating footage was Simpson's press conference 2 days later. He stood at a podium, no lawyers flanking him, no PR team softening his words, just a broken man accepting responsibility. "I am morally complicit in every crime committed under my leadership. My negligence enabled this horror. I will cooperate fully with federal authorities, testify against Richard Horn, and dedicate the rest of my life to making amends for what I failed to prevent." His reputation shattered. Stock prices plummeted. Shareholders called for his resignation. Simpson didn't care. He only cared about one person. 6 weeks later, Simpson and Ciara sat across from Richard Horn in a maximum security federal detention center visitation room. Richard wore an orange jumpsuit, his once perfect hair now gray and unkempt, hands cuffed to the table. He smiled when they entered, cold, predatory. Simpson and the failed experiment. Richard's eyes settled on Ciara with clinical detachment. "You were supposed to be dead. Subject 34, neurological trauma, spinal injury. We projected 6 months maximum survival, yet here you are." Ciara met his gaze, unflinching. "Here I am." "I don't understand," Simpson said quietly, voice strained. "How did I miss it? For years, Richard, how did you hide this from me?" Richard laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You were too busy playing empire builder to notice, Simpson. Too focused on quarterly earnings and shareholder value. I showed you exactly what you wanted to see. Profits, efficiency, growth. You signed everything I put in front of you without reading the fine print." "But children," Simpson's voice cracked. "How could you?" "They were assets," Richard interrupted, leaning forward. "Unidentified, no families, legally non-existent, perfect research subjects for breakthrough medical trials that would have generated billions. They were people." Ciara's voice cut through the room like steel. "Children, with names and futures you stole." Richard's smile widened. "You survived. Most didn't. Congratulations. But don't pretend you're whole. Look at you, stuck in that chair, working a factory line, living in poverty. I didn't break you. The experiment did. You're a failed result." Ciara rolled closer to the table, her eyes burning with quiet fury. You're wrong. You didn't break me. You tried. But I rebuilt myself every single day with my own hands, my own will. I earned my certifications. I mastered precision work. I saved my father's life in that parking garage using skills you tried to destroy. Richard's smile faltered. You failed, Ciara said softly. Not me, you. Silence filled the room. Richard looked away first. Simpson stood slowly. I came here hoping to understand, but there's nothing to understand. You're just broken, Richard. And I'm done trying to fix what was never whole. They left Richard sitting alone in that cold room. Rage and defeat etched across his face. Over the following months, Simpson dismantled every subsidiary linked to Richard's crimes, sold off compromised assets, and established the Ciara Drew Foundation for victims of medical exploitation. He offered Ciara a seat on the board. If you want it, he said gently, no pressure, no expectations. Ciara accepted, but on her terms. She would remain Ciara Drew professionally, Lillian Jones legally. Two names for one life, past and present, coexisting. I don't know how to be your daughter, she admitted one evening in his penthouse, staring out at the Detroit skyline. I remember nothing of Lillian. Everything I am came from Aunt Marla, the factory, surviving. Then be Ciara, Simpson replied. I lost Lillian 25 years ago, but I found you, and that's enough. They returned to the factory floor one final time before Simpson officially transferred ownership to a worker cooperative. News had broken. The wheelchair girl was Simpson Jones's daughter, a survivor of the company's darkest chapter. Workers lined the aisles as Ciara wheeled through, some applauding, others stunned into silence. Shanice approached, tears streaming down her face, embracing Ciara tightly. You're a damn warrior, Shanice whispered. Ciara smiled through her own tears. Just a factory worker who survived. The sun set over the Detroit River, painting the water in copper and gold. Simpson and Ciara stood and sat on a concrete overlook near the factory, the city stretching below them. Behind them, the Ciara Drew Foundation's first building glowed with newly installed lights. I failed you, Simpson said quietly, his voice heavy with decades of grief. Every day for 25 years, I failed to protect you. I should have asked more questions. I should have seen what Richard was doing. I should have... Stop. Ciara's voice was firm but not unkind. You can't give me back my legs. You can't give me back my childhood. You can't erase what happened. Simpson's shoulders sagged. But, Ciara continued, turning to look at him, you can make sure no one else loses theirs. That foundation, those children we're going to help, that's how you protect me now. Not by fixing the past, by changing the future. Simpson wiped his eyes roughly. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Good, Ciara said, a ghost of a smile crossing her face. Because I'm not offering it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm offering a beginning. A chance to build something that didn't exist before. She reached out her hand. Simpson took it, gripping tightly. I'll keep both names, Ciara said. Lillian Jones on legal documents. Ciara Drew in my heart. Because I'm both and neither. And that's okay. They sat in silence as the foundation's lights reflected off the river. Father and daughter standing and seated, scarred but not broken. The city stretched before them, full of possibility and pain, loss and redemption. Their past couldn't be rewritten. Their scars wouldn't disappear. But in that moment, watching the lights come on, in a building dedicated to protecting the vulnerable, they built something true from the ruins. Not forgiveness, not healing, just a beginning. And sometimes, that's enough. If this story moved you, share the moment. Don't let it fade. Follow Motherland Stories and tap that like button to keep these voices alive. Every day we uncover strong stories, raw truths, and quiet acts of courage that shape our world. Join a circle of listeners, dreamers, and changemakers, because every story deserves to be heard. This wasn't just an episode, it was a call to remember. Silence hides injustice. Courage exposes it. At Motherland Stories, we don't turn away. We bear witness. Subscribe and stand with stories that challenge power and celebrate truth.